Silence shattered when the city's most dangerous mob boss stormed into the diner. But he didn't come for blood. He came for her. Crouched in a puddle of spilled coffee, sobbing and broken, the plus-sized waitress whispered a secret so humiliating it brought the ruthless kingpin to his knees. What happened next changed everything. The neon sign outside O'Reilly's diner flickered with a persistent, annoying buzz, casting a sickly red glow over the rain-slicked pavement of Hell's Kitchen. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee, burnt onions, and bleach. For Aurora May, that smell was the scent of absolute despair. Aurora was 26, a deeply kind but exhausted woman, whose plus-sized frame bore the brunt of a world that was rarely kind to her. She was soft-spoken, with warm brown eyes and a smile that she used as a shield. But tonight, there were no smiles left. She was currently on hour 14 of a grueling double shift, a punishment disguised as a favor by her tyrannical manager, Greg Higgins. Aurora's younger sister, Lily, needed expensive treatments for a severe autoimmune condition, and Greg knew Aurora couldn't afford to lose this job. He exploited her desperation daily, assigning her the heaviest sections, the rudest customers, and forbidding her from taking breaks. Every step Aurora took behind the counter was a localized form of torture. The cheap, poorly fitted polyester uniform dress dug mercilessly into her skin. Because of her weight, the constant friction-heavy movement of walking back and forth across the diner for 14 hours had caused severe chafing on her inner thighs. The skin was rubbed completely raw, blistering and weeping under the fabric. Her ankles were swollen to twice their normal size, throbbing with a dull, heavy ache that made her vision blur at the edges. "Table 4 needs a refill, Aurora. Move it!" Greg barked from the register, not even looking up from his phone. He was a balding, cruel-eyed man who took distinct pleasure in belittling her. "You're moving like a tugboat today. People don't want to look at someone sweating over their eggs. Pick up the pace." Aurora bit her lip so hard she tasted copper. "Yes, Greg," she murmured, grabbing the heavy glass coffee pot. Her hands shook. As she walked, she tried to adjust her gait, keeping her legs slightly apart to prevent the raw, bleeding skin of her thighs from rubbing together. But the awkward waddle only made her feet hurt worse. She was near her breaking point. The physical pain was blinding, sending sharp, white-hot shocks up her spine with every agonizing step. Then the bell above the glass door chimed. The diner, previously filled with the low hum of 4 late-night truckers and a few insomniacs, instantly went deathly quiet. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Through the door walked Dante Costello. He was a man who needed no introduction in this borough. Dante was the head of the Costello Syndicate, a ruthless, impeccably dressed Mafia Don who controlled the docks, the local unions, and a vast underground empire. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and exuded an aura of quiet, terrifying lethality. He wore a tailored charcoal overcoat over a midnight blue suit, his dark hair neatly swept back, his jaw sharp and unforgiving. He was flanked by 3 massive enforcers, their eyes scanning the room like predatory wolves. Greg Higgins practically turned translucent. He scrambled out from behind the counter, nearly tripping over his own feet. "Mr. Costello, welcome. We weren't expecting you. Your usual booth?" Dante didn't even look at the manager. He simply gave a curt nod and walked to the large, red leather corner booth at the back of the diner. His men slid in around him, securing the perimeter. "Aurora," Greg hissed, grabbing her arm and squeezing hard enough to leave bruises. "Get over there. Give them whatever they want. On the house. If you mess this up, if you spill a single drop on that man, I won't just fire you. I'll make sure you never work in this city again. And fix your posture, for God's sake." Aurora swallowed hard, the coffee pot trembling in her grip. She took a deep breath, fighting back the tears of sheer physical agony welling in her eyes. She turned and began the long walk to the back booth. Every step was an inferno. The raw, open friction, burns on her inner thighs, screamed in protest. Her swollen knees buckled slightly, but she forced herself forward. "Just a few more hours," she told herself frantically. "Just get through this table. Do it for Lily." She reached the booth, her breathing shallow and ragged. She forced a polite, if strained, smile. Good evening, gentlemen. Can I start you off with some coffee?" Dante Costello slowly looked up. His eyes were a striking, piercing shade of steel blue. He didn't just look at her. He observed her. He noticed the tremor in her hands, the unnatural pallor of her face beneath the sheen of sweat, and the rigid, unnatural way she was standing, as if she were trying to hold her own body apart. He noticed the cruel bruises forming on her upper arm, where Greg had grabbed her. "Just black coffee for all of us," Dante said, his voice a deep, gravelly baritone that sent a shiver down Aurora's spine. It wasn't unkind, but it carried an undeniable weight of authority. "Right away," Aurora whispered. She leaned forward to pour the first cup. But as she shifted her weight, a sudden, blinding spasm of pain shot up from her inflamed legs. Her knee simply gave out. It happened in slow motion. Aurora gasped, her heavy body collapsing forward. She managed to twist her wrist just enough so the scalding coffee splashed onto the linoleum floor rather than on Dante. But the heavy glass pot shattered into a dozen pieces. Aurora hit the ground hard, her knees slamming into the unforgiving tile. The sound of breaking glass echoed like a gunshot in the silent diner. "Aurora!" Greg's voice shrieked from across the room, dripping with venom and panic. He sprinted toward the back booth, his face purple with rage. "You stupid, clumsy cow! I am so sorry, Mr. Costello. She's utterly useless. I've told her 1,000,000 times she's too big to be working tight spaces." Aurora lay on the floor among the shards of glass and pooling brown liquid. The fall had been the final straw. The dam broke. Humiliation, exhaustion, and unbearable, excruciating physical pain crashed over her all at once. She curled in on herself, burying her face in her hands, and began to sob. Deep, racking, ugly sobs that shook her entire plus-sized frame. Greg reached down, grabbing her by the collar of her cheap uniform. "Get up! Get up right now and clean this up, you fat embarrassment!" "I can't," Aurora wailed, the words tearing from her throat before she could stop them. She was completely broken. The agonizing friction burns on her thighs were bleeding now, sticking to the cheap fabric of her dress. Her muscles had locked up entirely. I can't close my legs. It hurts. It hurts so bad, they're bleeding. Please, I can't move." It was a deeply vulnerable, humiliating confession, shouted in the middle of a diner in front of the most dangerous men in the city. The other patrons looked away, deeply uncomfortable. Greg raised his hand, his face twisting with disgust, ready to strike her or drag her out by her hair. Smack! The sound of a heavy, silver-ringed fist slamming onto the Formica table stopped Greg dead in his tracks. Dante Costello stood up. He moved with a terrifying grace. He stepped out of the booth, towering over the terrified manager. The three enforcers instantly rose behind him, hands slipping inside their jackets. "Take your hands off her," Dante said softly. It was barely above a whisper, but it carried a lethal promise that made the hairs on the back of Aurora's neck stand up. Greg froze, instantly dropping Aurora's collar. He backed up, his hands raised in surrender. "Mr. Costello, I was just—" "I saw what you were doing," Dante interrupted, his blue eyes entirely devoid of warmth as they locked on to Greg. "I saw you grab her when she was at the register. I heard how you spoke to her. How many hours has she been on her feet today?" I, Greg stammered, sweating profusely. "Answer the question, little man, before I have Leo cut out your tongue," Dante stated matter-of-factly. "For 14, Greg whispered, terrified. 14 hours, Dante's jaw clenched. He looked down at the weeping woman on the floor. Aurora was still sobbing, trying desperately to cover her face, overcome with shame about her weight, her clumsiness, and the agonizing pain between her thighs that she had just confessed to the world. Dante Costello, a man who ordered hits and ran a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise, did something that made his own men blink in shock. He took off his expensive, custom-tailored charcoal overcoat. He dropped to his knees right into the spilled coffee and broken glass, completely ignoring the mess ruining his designer suit trousers. "Hey," Dante murmured, his deep voice suddenly shifting, dropping the lethal edge and replacing it with a shocking, velvety gentleness. "Look at me, sweetheart." Aurora slowly lowered her hands. Her face was red and blotchy, her eyes wide with terror, expecting violence. Instead, she found the mob boss looking at her with an expression of profound empathy. "You're bleeding?" he asked quietly, his eyes dropping briefly to the hem of her dress. Aurora nodded shamefully, fresh tears spilling over her cheeks. "The uniform. I'm too big for it, and I've been walking so much. The chafing. The skin is gone. I can't put my legs together anymore without it tearing." She squeezed her eyes shut, wishing the floor would open up and swallow her. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for the mess." "Don't you ever apologize for being overworked by a tyrant," Dante said firmly. He gently draped his heavy, warm charcoal overcoat around Aurora's shaking shoulders, pulling the lapels close to cover her front. It smelled of rich cologne and expensive tobacco. It felt like a shield. Dante stood up, his gaze snapping back to Greg. "Empty the register." Greg blinked, stunned. "You heard me," Dante said, stepping toward the manager. "Every dollar in that register. Every dollar in the back safe. Put it in a bag. Mr. Costello, please, that's the week's deposit." One of Dante's massive enforcers, a man with a scarred face named Tommy, took one step forward and cracked his knuckles. Greg let out a high-pitched squeak, turned on his heel, and sprinted behind the counter. Dante knelt back down beside Aurora. "Can you stand if I help you?" "I don't know," Aurora cried softly. "Where are you taking me?" "Out of here," Dante replied simply. "You're never stepping foot in this hellhole again." Before Aurora could process what was happening, Dante slid one strong arm behind her back and the other under her knees. He ignored her size, ignored her weight, and lifted her into his arms as effortlessly as if she were made of air. Aurora gasped, instinctively wrapping her arms around his thick neck, her face burying into the crook of his shoulder. He adjusted his grip carefully, ensuring her legs remained separated just enough so the agonizing friction burns wouldn't touch. The diner watched in absolute stunned silence as the ruthless Mafia Don cradled the sobbing, plus-sized waitress against his chest. Greg came scurrying out from behind the counter, holding a heavy canvas bank bag. His hands were trembling violently. Here it is. About 6,000. Dante didn't take the bag. He nodded to Tommy, who snatched it from Greg's shaking hands. That is her severance pay, Dante said coldly, his voice echoing in the quiet diner. And as for you, you're closing this diner. Tonight. For good. Greg's jaw dropped. But I lease this building from the Moretti family. The Morettis answer to me, Dante said softly. You're done, Greg. If I ever see your face in this city again, if I ever hear that you've hired another woman to abuse and degrade, they won't find enough of you to bury. Do we understand each other? Greg fell to his knees, utterly defeated and terrified. Yes, Mr. Costello. Dante turned on his heel, carrying Aurora towards the door. Leo, get the car. Tell the private clinic downtown we're coming in. We need someone to look at her legs and feet. Aurora lay against his chest, her sobs subsiding into quiet hiccups. The pain was still there, burning fiercely, but the sheer shock of the moment was overriding it. You don't have to do this, she whispered into his shoulder, her voice hoarse. I'm nobody. I'm just a fat waitress. Dante stopped just outside the diner doors, the cool night rain falling around them. He looked down at her, his intense blue eyes searching her face. You're not a nobody, Aurora, Dante said softly, surprising her by knowing her name. And you're exactly the kind of woman who deserves to be taken care of. Now rest. I've got you. As he carried her toward the sleek black town car idling at the curb, Aurora closed her eyes, the warmth of his coat and his strong arms providing the first sense of safety she had felt in years. Little did she know, this night was only the beginning of a storm that would change both of their lives forever. The tires of the armored Lincoln town car hissed against the wet asphalt as they sped through the neon-lit streets, leaving the grim reality of Hell's Kitchen far behind. Aurora lay exhausted in the spacious back seat, her head resting against Dante Costello's broad shoulder. The heavy charcoal coat was still wrapped around her shivering frame. For the first time in years, she wasn't fighting to survive the next hour. She was simply being held. They arrived at the Harrison Price Private Medical Clinic in Upper Manhattan, a discreet, high-security facility favored by the city's elite, and its most dangerous. Dante carried her inside through a private underground entrance. The medical staff, led by a seasoned physician named Dr. Harrison Reed, asked no questions. They moved with a terrifying efficiency that spoke of long association with the Costello Syndicate. Within an hour, Aurora's world transformed. She was bathed gently by nurses, her blistered and bleeding thighs treated with a cooling, advanced medical salve that instantly killed the blinding agony of the friction burns. Her swollen, bruised feet were wrapped in soothing compression bandages, dressed in a silk hospital gown that actually fit her plus-sized curves perfectly. Dante had someone procure it immediately. She was placed in a lavish private suite that looked more like a 5-star hotel room than a hospital. Dante sat in a leather armchair in the corner of the room, sipping a glass of amber whiskey, watching her chest rise and fall as the pain medication finally allowed her to relax. "Why are you doing this?" Aurora's voice was a rough whisper, breaking the heavy silence of the room. She shifted slightly in the plush bed, pulling the high thread count sheets up to her chin. "You run this city. You're Dante Costello. I'm just a fat, clumsy waitress who spilled coffee on your floor. Men like you don't save women like me." Dante set his glass down on the mahogany side table. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his piercing steel blue eyes locking onto hers. "Men like me destroy things, Aurora," Dante said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "We tear down, we extort, we break. But occasionally we see something so pure, so relentlessly good, that it makes us stop in our tracks. I didn't just walk into O'Reilly's diner by coincidence tonight." Aurora's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" Dante stood up, walking slowly to the edge of her bed. "That diner was a front. Greg Higgins was laundering money for the Moretti family, a rival outfit trying to encroach on my territory. My men and I have been sitting in that corner booth for 3 weeks, gathering evidence, learning their drop schedules. We were planning to burn the place to the ground." He paused, reaching out to gently brush a stray lock of brown hair behind Aurora's ear. His touch was shockingly tender for hands that had committed so much violence. "But then I saw you," Dante confessed, "the ruthless Mafia Don, laying his soul bare in the sterile quiet of the clinic. I watched you work 14-hour shifts without a single complaint. I watched you take your own meager tips, money you desperately needed, and buy a sandwich for the homeless veteran who sleeps in the alley out back. I saw the way you smiled at the miserable patrons who treated you like garbage, absorbing their cruelty just to keep the peace." Aurora's breath hitched. She felt her face burn, overwhelmed by the realization that this powerful man had been observing her every move. "I did a background check on you, Aurora," Dante continued, pulling a thick manila folder from his jacket and dropping it onto the bed. "I know about the crushing medical debt. I know about your sister, Lily. I know she has a rare autoimmune disease, and that you let Greg Higgins abuse you because you needed his insurance plan to afford her treatments." Aurora gasped, tears springing to her eyes. "Lily, if I lose my job, she dies, Dante. The treatments are already taken care of," Dante interrupted softly. "The Costello Syndicate controls the docks, Aurora, but we also own major shares in the pharmaceutical distribution networks on the East Coast. As of an hour ago, Lily has been transferred to the VIP wing of this very clinic. Dr. Reed is assembling a team of top specialists. She will never miss a treatment again, and you will never pay another dime." Aurora began to weep, but this time they were not tears of pain or humiliation. They were tears of overwhelming, absolute relief. The crushing weight of the world, a weight she had carried alone for nearly a decade, had just been lifted from her shoulders by the most feared criminal in New York. "But why?" Aurora sobbed, reaching out to grip his large, calloused hand. "What do you want from me? In return?" Dante knelt by the side of the bed, bringing her knuckles to his lips. "I want you to let me take care of you. I want you to stop hurting yourself for a world that doesn't appreciate your heart. I don't see a clumsy waitress, Aurora. I see the strongest woman I've ever met. And I want you to be mine." 3 weeks passed. Aurora and Lily were moved into the sprawling, heavily fortified Costello estate in Long Island. Aurora's chafed legs healed completely, and with plenty of rest, proper nutrition, and a stress-free environment, the swelling in her ankles vanished. For the first time in her life, she was pampered. Dante bought her custom-tailored clothing that flattered her heavy curves, making her feel beautiful and desired. He treated her like a queen, showering her with affection and respect that shattered every insecurity she had ever held about her body. But the peace of the mafia underworld is always an illusion. The Moretti family, enraged by the loss of their money-laundering hub at O'Reilly's diner, wanted blood. Salvatore Moretti, a vicious, old-school mobster, discovered Dante's new weakness. He learned about the kind-hearted, plus-sized woman living in the Costello mansion. It happened on a stormy Tuesday night. Dante was away in the city, tying up loose ends regarding the Moretti territory. Aurora was in the grand library of the estate, reading by the fireplace, when the estate's alarm system shrieked to life. Gunfire erupted outside, the loud, rhythmic popping of automatic weapons echoing over the rolling thunder. The heavy mahogany doors of the library burst open. Tommy, the scarred enforcer from the diner, rushed in, blood trailing from a grazing wound on his shoulder. "Miss Aurora, we have to move. The Morettis breached the west gate. They have numbers. Dante is 10 minutes out." Aurora's heart hammered against her ribs, but the panic that used to paralyze her at the diner was nowhere to be found. She had found something worth living for. She grabbed a heavy bronze fire poker from the hearth. "Where is Lily?" "Safe room in the basement. Leo has her," Tommy grunted, shoving a heavy bookshelf in front of the door. "We need to get you down there." Before they could move, the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the library shattered inward in a shower of deadly shards. 3 men in tactical gear stepped through the broken glass, rifles raised. "Drop it, Tommy," the lead hitman shouted. He sneered, looking Aurora up and down. "So this is the fat cow Costello threw away an empire for. Salvatore sends his regards." He raised his weapon toward Aurora. Time seemed to slow down. Aurora didn't cower. She didn't weep like the broken woman in the diner. Acting on pure adrenaline, she hurled the heavy bronze fire poker with all her might. It spun through the air, catching the lead hitman squarely in the face. He stumbled backward, his shot going wide and shattering a crystal chandelier. Taking advantage of the distraction, Tommy drew his sidearm, taking down 2 of the men in quick succession. But the third man recovered, leveling his weapon at Aurora's chest. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoed through the broken windows. Dante Costello vaulted through the shattered frame, a terrifying vision of absolute wrath. He moved with lethal precision, disarming the final hitman in a blur of motion and sending him crashing to the floor. Dante didn't hesitate. He dealt with the threat permanently, ensuring the man would never look at Aurora again. Panting, his suit ruined, and rain soaking his hair, Dante turned frantically, scanning the room. "Aurora!" He dropped his weapon and crossed the room in 3 massive strides, pulling her into a desperate, crushing embrace. Aurora clung to him, burying her face in his chest, shaking from the adrenaline but entirely unharmed. "I'm okay," she choked out, her hands gripping the lapels of his jacket. "I'm okay, Dante." Dante cupped her face, his thumbs wiping away a stray tear. His eyes were pulled with a fear he had never known before. Salvatore signed his own death warrant tonight. By dawn, the Moretti family will be a memory in this city. He pressed his forehead against hers, his voice thick with emotion. "I swear on my life, Aurora. No one will ever hurt you again. Not a boss, not a hitman, not a single soul." "I know," Aurora whispered, looking up into the eyes of the ruthless killer who had become her savior. "I trust you." That night, Dante kept his promise. The Costello Syndicate wiped out the Moretti leadership in a swift, merciless wave of retribution. The streets of New York learned a new, unbreakable rule. Dante Costello's empire was absolute, and the woman at his side was untouchable. A year later, the trauma of the diner was a distant nightmare. Aurora stood on the balcony of their private villa in Sicily, sipping espresso and watching the sunrise over the Mediterranean. She wore a stunning, flowing white dress that accentuated her curves, a diamond ring gleaming heavily on her left hand. Lily was inside, healthy and thriving, arguing playfully with Leo and Tommy over a game of cards. Dante stepped out onto the balcony, wrapping his strong arms around Aurora's waist from behind. He pressed a kiss to her neck, pulling her warm, soft body against his. "You saved my life, Dante," Aurora murmured, leaning back into his embrace. "No, Mia Regina," Dante whispered, looking out at the horizon. "You saved my soul." Aurora's journey from a broken, humiliated waitress to a powerful mafia queen proves that sometimes the darkest corners of the world hold the most unexpected saviors. True love doesn't care about your weight, your struggles, or your past. It only cares about the strength of your heart. If Aurora's incredible story of resilience, unexpected romance, and ultimate triumph moved you, please drop a like on this video. Don't forget to share this story with your friends and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, dramatic tales every week.